Hello all. So full disclosure, I've had a really bad cold this week, so I apologize. Breathing is a little bit of an issue, but we will get through this. This week's Parsha is Parshat VaYeshev, and I've entitled it, Our Journey is Never Complete. While there is indeed curative power in challenges, as we discussed last week in exploring Parshat VaYishlach, we begin with a settling word, VaYeshev, that may actually be more unsettling in this week's narrative. As Aviva Zornberg teaches, we might consider the following. Yaakov has fatally misread the structure, the plot, the moral motifs of his own life. Yaakov was settled, VaYeshev. That is, Yaakov sought to settle in peace. There leapt upon him the agitation of Yosef. The righteous seek to settle in peace. And God says, is it not enough for the righteous what is prepared for them in the world to come, that they seek to settle in peace in this world? Rashi suggests that this statement is much more aspirational than factual, that righteous people would like to have their lives settled and make sense. Yet watch what happens as the Parsha opens. VaYeshev Yaakov be'eretz megurei aviv be'eretz Canaan. And Yaakov settled in Hebron, which is the region where his father had lived, which is in Canaan. Here, Rashi is suggesting that settled means returning to his roots, something that could not be done for Abraham. Here we add something, as we have spoken along the way, that each generation, each set of circumstances adds another component, another aspect to the total of the picture. We add something, and we have the hopes and prospect of continuity. Maybe that's what the settling is, that there will be continuity, some comfort that regardless of the challenges and the lack of settling, that at least there is some promise here, some aspirational hope, some real indication that life will continue for this family. Maybe this is the meaning of VaYeshev. The following narrative is the chronicle of the descendants of Yaakov that we get in our text. Elude toldot Yaakov. Joseph was 17 years old. He was pasturing with his brothers. He acted like a young, immature boy. Remember, he goes and he tells his dreams and all of that. So notice very quickly we go from verse 1 to verse 2. VaYeshev, settling. The elude toldot, these are the generations, these are the happenings, this is the history. And we're going to see very quickly that the notion of being settled, as I would suggest, is being at peace with our generations, and they're continuing our lines and heritage more than being settled in my life, for example. We're continuing and working on what was left unfinished in the part of the collective journey before us. But then we go on in the text, we see Yisrael ahav Joseph mikol banav. He loved Joseph more than all the other sons because he was the son of his old age, and he's being called Yisrael here. It's very interesting to see when he's called Yisrael, when he's called Yaakov. Already we've moved from Yaakov in verse 1 and verse 2 to Yisrael in verse 3. Yisrael meaning he struggled. So does it mean that here is the source of this struggling that will continue in the unsettling part of being settled in our generations? The brothers see that their father loved him more than all the other brothers, so they hated him. They could not speak with him. Joseph has a dream, tells it to his brothers. They hate him more. So now we have a new, but old, set of problems. Sibling angst, rivalry. First due to the perceived favoritism by God, in the case of Cain v'Hevel, then by the instructions of what might be culturally considered the first wife, in the case of Sarah, who has Abraham send Hagar and Ishmael away, and then through family dysfunction and discord in the case of Yaakov and Esav. Here, Yaakov is continuing to show favoritism, as has been done in previous generations. And in this way, his family and he are definitely not settled. Here's the next task for the coming generation. Perhaps the sense is that things are as settled as possible at this point in time in the context of the larger story, and this needs to be enough for now, or alternatively, there is to be no sense of being settled yet. Clearly, this notion of being settled is at best subjective and conditional, and very likely not considering all of the elements in one situation at any given time. Zornberg provides perspective here as well when she states that the text at which Yaakov and Esav's journeys are no longer intertwined. She teaches as follows. Rootlessness of the patriarchs can be read retroactively as having fulfilled the terms of covenantal suffering. Yaakov realizes this as Esav has left the Holy Land to find his own separate destiny. This seems to indicate the end of the vicissitudes of the covenant. Now, Yaakov's mind was settled. Things seemed to fall into proper perspective. A kind of clarity and coherence invested the narrative of family history as he sets himself to read it. End of quote. However, this may not be, and clearly is not, the entire picture for God, who is watching and facilitating the many different paths of history that are represented here by its various players. This is the nature of the limitations of the human being. No one person or even one entity can fulfill and be part of all of history. Rather, our paths must be chosen, accepted, and fulfilled, while others do the same with their paths. As we acknowledge this, we must also accept that at best we are only seeing part of the picture in its totality, and that others are seeing their part of the cumulative picture. Perhaps Yosef's not realizing this when he shared his interpretation of his dreams. His limited understanding eluded him, and thus ultimately was unsettling to all, to his brothers, his parents, and perhaps even to himself. This is a most challenging achievement for all of us as human beings, to understand the potentially wide rift between our understanding of reality and what it means to feel settled and that of others. We certainly see this playing out today in very real ways, with Israelis and Palestinians, with different political allegiances in the USA, with the former Soviet Union and Ukraine, and generally throughout the world, including many other regions that we don't even talk about and are in great, great pain and conflict. Now let's look for a moment at the text relating the dreams as being Yosef's perspective and his brothers' and parents' reaction. He says to them, "Vayomer alehem shimu na chalom hazeh asher chalamti." Listen to me, to this dream I had. And later, when we see, and we will even see at the end of this Parsha, where he interprets the dreams for Pharaoh's two officers, the two folks that had been in jail with him, that he says, chalamot, that these come from God, that his interpretation for these come from God. So if he believes that, and he says, here we were, binding sheaves in the midst of the field, and my sheaf stood up and remained upright, and yours formed a circle around mine. So their response to him is, hold on, buddy. Would you really seek to reign over us? Would you really seek to rule over us? They hated him even more because of his dreams and because of his talk. He has another dream. And he says, look, I had another one, the sun, the moon, the stars, everyone presenting themselves to me. He then goes, VaYesaper laviv ve'el achiv vayigar bo aviv. He tells his father, his brothers, this dream, and his father chided him, and he said, what nonsense! What's this dream that you had? Will I, your mother, and your brothers come and prostrate ourselves on the ground before you? Joseph's brothers at this point remain jealous of him. And his father holds himself back, as we would say. His father is going to reserve judgment. This is very much all about being unsettled when looking outside of himself. Yosef does not even acknowledge his brother's reactions. And it's very interesting to compare this with the later narrative when the brothers come to him and he responds to them in Pharaoh's court, which we will see as we move along. He goes right ahead, shares his dreams, which increase the fracture in the family. This only continues to worsen and will, of course, result in a series of events that will be unsettling to all. Will this family ever settle, be able to truly say VaYeshev, the increasing and widening fissures in their relationship? How are we to understand Yaakov's status at this moment, waiting for history to unfold as Yisrael, his new name, or hoping for some familial reconciliation as Yaakov, father to his sons? I've often taught one to be mindful of when his two names are being used. One in a professional tone, if you will, in terms of the collective, and one perhaps more personal. And is it plausible for him to be settled in both roles, or will one be sacrificed to the other? In considering this quandary and the juxtaposition of his two roles, which one could say are represented by the two names, how are we to understand what happens next? His brothers go to pasture their father's flocks in Shechem. Our commentators are invested in protecting their defined and preferred protagonists. Once again, here they are Yosef and Yaakov. So, according to Rashi, we will read negative notions of the brothers, and this is indicated in verse 12 of our reading of our chapter regarding the word et, because over the word et there are dots, and we're told this means that the brothers only went out for selfish means, according to Rashi. Again, trying to set up the good and the bad to make it easier for us, but to settle it for us. But it's not settled. And acknowledging the nuances and the incompleteness and the conflicts is the type of unsettledness that sits on our shoulders continually as human beings. Yisrael, Yaakov Yisrael is the name used here, says to Yosef, now your brothers are pasturing in Shechem, come, I'm going to send you to check on them. And what does Yosef respond? Vayomer lo hineni, that code word, I'm here, I will do your bidding. So in which role, I'm thinking, would Yaakov Yisrael be speaking here? Is he speaking in terms of family discord, or is he acknowledging the largesse of the future? If he has to come on a personal level to accept, because he does say Yisrael here, not Yaakov, if he comes to accept on a personal level the discord in his family, is he comforted or settled by understanding in some way that events will have to unfold in a manner to ensure the continuity, and that in looking at the largesse, that the greater contours of the picture, things will work out okay in the end. This parallels other narratives that we have already learned with conversational elements. Here, Hineni, Lechna, one could say these are repeated tropes for a sense of settledness in an unsettled manner. Yisrael then says to him, go, see how your brothers and the flocks are faring, bring me back a report. And note that, again, there is a different type of settledness having its roots in past chapters of one generation. Go check on your brothers, and mentioning names of places that already have a history with this family. Hebron, Shechem, these are known places. This is that continuity, that settledness in terms of this is our, if you will, the Dalet Amot, the historical platform in which we function. As we see, there is no completed or unfettered settledness here, nor is there in our lives. Within this understanding, I would like to suggest that there may be at least two tikkunim, two kind of actions that fix what needs to be fixed, that are noteworthy here. One appears in chapter 37, when the brothers are discussing how to rid themselves of Yosef, their perceived competitor and troublemaker. Yehuda says to his brothers, Ma betza ki naharog et achino, v'chisinu et dama. What is to be gained if we kill our brother and cover his blood, hide his death? Going back to Cain and Hevel, if you remember, that doesn't work. The bloods cry to God from the ground. So Yehuda does not want to do it that way. Come, he says instead, let's sell him, v'nim kareno l'yishmaelim, and let our hand not strike him. We will not be responsible. He is our brother, our own flesh. Vayishma'u achiv. His brothers listened to him. So they will not kill him. They will just sort of leave him to the fate of others, and they can claim they do not know. Now, this is not exactly praiseworthy action, and I don't recommend it for any familial unit to go this way. This is not praiseworthy from the brothers' point of view, except that they do decide not to kill him and rather to leave his future to chance. Here, being unsettled might be better, because if he's killed, that's the end. But here, who knows what the future will hold? As we know all too well, this will indeed work out in the end, leading to the second tikkun. Namely, the very vehicle that started the conflict, this chapter of unsettledness, will be Yosef's saving skill set, namely, interpreting dreams. Many commentators suggest that this certainly works out the way it was meant to, and in terms of history and God's larger picture, this may very well be. However, within the understanding of the larger picture of what it means to have a situation settled, there are clearly elements in which this is not the case. So, in returning to our two main personae of interest here, let's consider what is settled and what is not. First, let's look at Birkat Rabbeinu HaKodesh, who clearly indicates that neither Yaakov nor Yosef are in any way settled due to their actions. Said the sages, 2 righteous men were punished on account of the bearing of malevolent reports, Yaakov and Yosef. Because Yosef spoke badly of his brothers, he was incarcerated in prison for 12 years, and because Yaakov listened to these reports, the divine spirit departed from him for 22 years. This teaches us that one who speaks negatively of another is punished once, while someone who listens to negative talk about another is twice punished. Further, we learn in the Midrash Rabbah about a further infraction on the part of Yaakov. Rav Lakish says in the name of Rav Elazar ben Azariah, a person should not discriminate amongst his children, for on account of the coat of many colors, which our father Yaakov made for Yosef, they hated him. Rashi also wants us to consider that this is not black or white, and it may be some unsettledness now can lead to better situations later in time. From what is stated to their discredit, we may infer something to their credit. They did not speak one thing with their mouth while having something quite different in their hearts. In other words, they didn't hold back, but there also wasn't anything that was not said. Say it like it is. So, is it good? Is it bad? Does it pivot things in the way they're supposed to go at the expense of temporary setbacks or fissures? Who knows? These are just a few indications of lack of things being settled. And here's the lesson for us. We are never settled per se. For if one conflict has been resolved, there are others around the corner. Not being settled is the condition of our human situation. For if we were truly settled, Chazal tells us we would not try for something better. This is the message of the Talmud, Masachet Yoma 69b, when considering the place of the Yetzer Hara in each one of us and the harm that the Yetzer Hara can do. And this is from our Gemara. Zechariah the prophet said to them, "See, you must understand that even if you want to kill this evil inclination, that's Yetzer Hara, the world will be destroyed. Because as a result of killing the Yetzer Hara, there will no longer be any desire to make things better, to procreate, to bring people into the world, to work to make things more improved." They followed his warning, and instead of killing the Yetzer Hara, they imprisoned it for 3 days. During those 3 days, the people searched for a fresh egg through all of Eretz Yisrael and could not find one, since the inclination to reproduce, to put out something that could meet the needs of the world and make it feel better, was quashed. The chickens stopped laying eggs. They said, "What should we do now?" We all know the adage that if something is truly worthwhile, it will take more than one generation to accomplish it. As we have been discussing in these weekly Parshot, each generation must add something to the previous ones to show themselves truly worthy of the inherited promise bestowed. The journey is never completed. We are never fully settled. And to think it is would show a lack of understanding of the human condition. As Nechama Leibowitz always taught, to look for the absolute good guys, or the absolute bad guys, or the absolute good times or bad times is missing the point. We all have all of these elements in us. And all of these elements are needed so that we will continually strive for something better. Just as we see in our Parsha, VaYeshev, though the word may indicate completeness, our lives are anything but that. They are not settled. The journey is never complete. And is that lack of being settled that will spur us on to continue the journey for others. I wish you all Shabbat Shalom, Kol Tuv, Lehitraot b'Shavua haba.